Welcome to Kalkine TV's Property Talks. I'm Sage, and as the property market is surging, we are bringing you experts, opinions to share on our platform to hear their insights on infrastructure and the economy. And today we have Louise, who is the local member for Stanmore in the Inner West Council District of Sydney. And she spoke at the Smart Cities Expo World Forum in 2019. She's also a lawyer, a poet and artist, among other things. And as Sydney has plans to develop into a global city, we welcome Louise. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sage. Nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you. Well, Louise, without any further ado, I'm sure the audience is keen to hear your insights. Let's begin the questions.
Go ahead.
Welcome again to Kalkine's Property Talks show. We'd like to hear your insights into how smart cities are relevant to infrastructure and growth that aligns with construction and the property space. Also, Stanmore is one of the suburbs from the Inner West area that offers promising growth. Do you think home buyers should keep an eye on Stanmore?
Stanmore has been more than a promising area for the last 30 years, which is how long I've lived in Stanmore. The beauty of Stanmore is that it is close to all the amenities that you need. It's close to transport, schools, shops and hospitals. But you have a beautiful village atmosphere because thankfully we don't have gigantic high-rise, particularly in Stanmore, and so we have a lot of traditional houses, which creates and sporting grounds and parks, which create a beautiful village atmosphere. I represent, as a councillor for Inner West Council, Stanmore Ward, which actually covers the entire area: Camperdown, Enmore, Newtown, Stanmore, Petersham, and Lewisham. So it's a geographically small area, but it's a high population. There's 40,000 people and very high growth in all those areas. Newtown, which is the suburb next to me, is actually booming in every way possible at the moment, as people would know. And Petersham is going to be the rank. That's on the other side of me. Stanmore is just squeezed in the middle between those two suburbs. Petersham has a very large development going on now, which is the Petersham RSL redevelopment, which will introduce 360 apartments to the area right near the train line. So the state government is now rebuilding that station so that it has a lift. It's got thousands of steps, much to everyone's despair over many years. And it will be a very big area. One issue is the parking, though. That's going to be a major problem because we simply cannot provide parking for everybody. So we encourage everyone to get on the train. It's very reliable. Use public transport and sit back and relax with a book while you're on your journey.
Sounds good. Sounds definitely worth the visit. So, as a council member, you have been actively involved in finding beneficial long-term housing solutions. How do you plan to bring in affordable housing amid the impeccable price surge in cities at the moment?
Well, council has been working on this for many years. We have a small portfolio of affordable housing, which units owned by council directly as a result of agreements made with developers, and we engage community management organisations to manage them for us. I'd like to actually explain what affordable housing is. People have quite the misconception of what it is. The concept of affordable housing is generally to provide support for vital services working in an area who may not be able to afford that area, and that is police, teachers, nurses, doctors, and other firemen and other fire persons and other essential services. The state government has actually set out a sliding scale of income which defines what affordable housing is. In addition, we traditionally have had a very high level of boarding houses. We have 75 boarding houses in our local government area, which is the highest number in any part of the state. And a number of these provide community housing for vulnerable people, and they're managed by community community housing organisations, and they're managed very well. And it's important for people who are vulnerable, who have perhaps an intellectual disability or a physical disability, or in some other way are a vulnerable person, to feel that they live in an integrated community where they can be part of that community and they're not hidden away or find it difficult to get around. And the beauty of having those facilities in the Inner West is that it's very easy for those people to enjoy a high quality of life because of the facilities that I mentioned earlier being readily available to them, as well as the necessary support services. So that's one kind of affordable housing for very vulnerable people, and as well as the affordable housing provided by council and by other organisations for people working in vital services. One problem is it's simply not possible to provide that level of affordable housing for everyone. What we're seeing now is use of the boarding house laws to build a new kind of housing, largely aimed at foreign students, but now as we are seeing less foreign students coming in, it may well be of greater interest to other people, and that is studio style housing in large scale accommodation. There is a difficulty with that, using the boarding house regulations to do this, as it enables smaller size rooms, which is why they're aimed at students. They don't provide housing for couples or families, especially families with children, but they're popping up like mushrooms all over the Inner West because they're seen as low cost to build and high yield. Not so much the case at the moment. They're now rents have reduced on those kind of accommodation, so that they're now $250 to $300. That's still too much for people who are unemployed or living on a pension, but it is affordable for people with a job. However, I think what we need is to continue as we are with mixed accommodation as well. That kind of accommodation is valuable for one section of the community, but eventually people form couples, they get married, they want to have children, then they need something else. And sending them to live on the outskirts of some part of the community in the Inner West is not to maintain our housing stock of larger accommodation that will accommodate families as well. We know the Inner West is vibrant because it does have such a wide mix of people living here. There's no one age group, there's no one ethnic group. We have diversity in every kind of way that you can think of: race, age, gender, sexuality, everything. And that is really important because that mix of people makes it a vibrant and exciting place to live, where something is always happening and something's always going on, and people can access the resources that they need. And we need to really make sure when we're looking at new developments that that will be able to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your insights there. And it sounds like a great opportunity for developers and also those essential service workers to look to the Inner West for some housing opportunities. So renewable energy in homes and businesses is also one of your agendas to work upon. Do you think we have the right conditions to bring forward this massive change? And while we have prioritised to reduce carbon emissions on the macro front, how do we successfully bring in renewable energy in homes and businesses in Sydney, in your opinion?
That's a really excellent question, Sage. The Inner West actually has a low rate of houses taking up solar energy in their homes. That is not because it is opposed in the Inner West. In fact, it's an extremely popular policy. But what it means is it is difficult for solar to be integrated into the kind of housing we have in the Inner West. There are heritage issues with the older homes in putting solar panels on the roof, or simply integrating solar panels into the existing designs of housing. There's also issues in including it in new developments, although I think it should be included in new developments, but there are design and infrastructure issues there too. So what Inner West has actually been doing has been concentrating on commercial use of solar energy, as well as encouraging residents to take up solar energy more. And we've had a lot of success with that. Inner West Council itself has signed a contract to obtain 25% of its energy needs from Moree Solar Farm. And that is a fantastic initiative. And it has also partnered with some community organisations to install solar panels on business roofs. A great example of that is the Camperdown Commons complex, which has recently had that put in, thanks to Inner West Council and the associated organisation. And they're hoping to use that as an example to show people how solar energy can be used in a productive way. But we do definitely need to do more to encourage people to put it on their houses. I think cost, as well as the design factors, is a major factor. And solar is coming down all the time because it's so much used. Another issue is the state government policy, which where people who do have solar installed were finding that they were actually putting more electricity into the system than they were actually using, and which is good. It shows that the whole thing works really well, but they weren't being sufficiently compensated for that. They weren't earning what an energy company would earn from that input. And there have been suggestions also by the state government that people should be charged more for using solar, even though they're actually putting more energy into the grid than they're getting out of it. That is a ridiculous policy that is purely aimed at protecting certain vested interests that we all need isn't to adding solar. So we've got to look at it holistically, but I think if we improve our development controls so that it will be easier for people to install solar in our area, that will be very helpful to the cause.
Thank you so much for your insights. And it sounds like there's some brilliant projects there that you mentioned in Camperdown and some other ones where the Inner West is doing a great deal to get the solar initiative started. So, Louise, Sydney is blessed with beautiful vast swathes of green space, including Domain, Hyde Park and the Sydney University. How do you plan to look at preserving the local green spaces in the Inner West and also building new age green areas?
Well, this is a massive issue in the Inner West as it is everywhere else. Because of the pressures on our population, on the local government area, it's only 38 square metres, our local government area, but it houses 200,000 people. So it's very densely populated and the density is increasing. This means that it's very difficult to actually create new green spaces. What we have to do is make sure that we maximise the spaces we already have. Fortunately, we have a number of sporting fields in the area and a number of parks, ranging from pocket parks to quite large parks such as Petersham Park and part of Sydney Park, and we are able to maintain those. One big issue that we're facing is the issue of natural turf versus synthetic turf on sporting grounds. Sporting groups, of which we have the highest number again in the state. Everybody is very athletic in the Inner West. Sporting groups tend to like the synthetic turf because it enables them to play more games all year round. But it does have a lot of environmental factors that are adverse. For example, it needs constant watering during the summertime because otherwise it will be too hot to play on. It does not provide a habitat for the small creatures and plants that actually hold the soil together and enrich the soil. And it can actually increase injuries as well because the plastic can be very harsh on the skin when people fall over. So there are pros and cons. Natural turf does provide a habitat for worms, insects and small things that keep the soil together, enrich the soil and enable the soil to provide a good support for larger birds and animals and trees as well. It's all part of the ecosystem. It does need watering, but probably less or no more certainly than synthetic turf, and it provides a softer surface, reducing injuries as well. So that's one big issue. We have some natural turf, we have some synthetic turf. In terms of tree planting, we've got a $5 million tree planting scheme for the whole of the LGA, and all of that will go into streets and into our parks. We have suffered quite a large reduction of our canopy at the moment, which was already less than 20% of the coverage for the LGA, and that is the result of major state construction projects such as the Sydney Metro and WestConnex, which saw a large number of trees being removed. The trouble is, when you have tree planting, you're replacing mature trees with saplings, and they take a very long time to grow and provide the benefits that the mature trees did. So that is an ongoing issue that we're aware of, and that we are looking at alleviating. One thing I want to say about trees is that they're really good for property values. This is little known. People talk about the environmental values, but those environmental values actually translate into actual dollars. And I think people who are interested in property investment should be aware of this. There is a reason that the leafier suburbs have higher prices, and that is because trees reduce heat by up to 20 degrees centigrade, but also simply the appearance of a tree can increase the value of your property by 10%, which is quite huge when you think that that's all you need to do. You don't even need to paint the front of your house. You've got a nice tree out the front, you've automatically got a higher value property. And also, people like to live in areas where there is more amenity, and that's what trees provide. They provide shade, cooling, housing for birds and animals and things like that. And that also has a direct effect on property prices. So even if people don't care about the environment at all, maintaining trees is a very smart move to maintain the value of their property. And I would encourage everyone to make sure that they have plenty of trees in their surroundings for that reason.
Very, very worthwhile advice there, Louise. Thank you for sharing that. Now, we've got about 10 more minutes to get through the rest of the questionnaire, and I can't wait to hear your insights on the following questions. So Australia has also witnessed the newest type of real estate investment, co-living, in the last 2 to 3 years. And these properties in the sector have hit Sydney's rental market and created quite a stir. And one of the such properties was in Stanmore, in Sydney's inner west area. Such co-living spaces, which you've touched on a little bit, are most likely to attract the millennials. Co-living is similar to the co-working space projects working out well in the US, Britain and Asia. And what are your thoughts on the same? Can you list the pros and cons, in your opinion, to co-living spaces?
Well, I think they have similar pros and cons to co-working spaces, which have not been terribly successful in the inner west. One reason is that during COVID, people had to spend a lot more time in their own home space, and they needed a bit of a bigger space. But co-living also provides a way of people getting to meet each other and hang out together, and I think and give a feeling of community. And I think that's really important as well. I don't think they're just for millennials. In fact, I think there is a very good case for co-living for older people as well, particularly older people who are single, who may not have family support, and who definitely don't want to live in a retirement village because they're still young and vigorous, but they do need people around them for social reasons, to help them out and that sort of thing. So I think that is actually a big untapped market. We have an ageing population in the inner west, as we do everywhere in Australia, and their needs are not being met. So I think we need to start thinking a bit laterally about what co-living really means. Millennials one day will get older. In fact, they're all getting older already. I've got 2 of them and one's over 30. And so they're not going to want to live in that kind of space for forever. They will want to live in a different way as their life needs turn out differently, having families and so on. But there will always be a need for people, older people, or simply other people who don't otherwise have a community. We do have some housing community organisations who are building these sorts of things, and there's a very interesting one that's going on in Marrickville at the moment, and what they're going to do is make flexible spaces so that they can house not just singles, but they can house families or couples as well, in accordance with the need of those people. And that's being built by a specialist organisation which specialises in building co-living for vulnerable people, and that will be extremely interesting because it may well become a way for developers and investors to see a completely different kind of housing that they will be able to provide, that meets the needs of many different kinds of people. So it's a very exciting project that's happening down there.
Sounds great. So if people were interested in this sort of co-living, could they head to your website to find out more?
Well, in a West Council website, they need to have a look at, because that kind of information would be on. They should also have a look at some of the community housing sites. Nightingale Housing, actually a Melbourne site, has a lot of information about the kind of co-living projects that they're developing, and they're thinking about affordable housing and housing for vulnerable people in a completely different way. So that's very exciting, and they're the people who will be building the one in Marrickville. So so it's a first for the area.
Great, thank you so much. So on to the next question. The unprecedented price surge is believed to be inflated by inadequate supply and demand of existing stock amid record low interest rates. Do you think the regulators can or should curb price surges by putting a brake on the mortgage lending at the moment?
No, I don't. And the reason why I don't is because people will always need housing, and needing to own your own home in Australia is an important need. There's a big demand for it. I think actually the pressure isn't coming from people wanting to buy their own home, but from investors who are making use of the low interest rates to invest in the property market. And I can't see any way of the government stopping that kind of investment either. What we do need to make sure is that the housing that investors are building meets the needs of the population and remains affordable. And we can do that. There are a lot of different measures we can do that through planning regulations and through simply sitting down and discussing with investors what they need to do to actually do that. For example, we need to ensure that there are sufficient trees on a site, that there's sufficient green space on a site, that the rooms themselves are big enough. I have seen some developments, not happily in the inner west, but in some other local government areas, where developers were suggesting that it would be all right to build a kitchen that was too small to put the fridge in, or a dining room that was so small the dining room had to be in front of the access stairs that led into the garage. That is inadequate design. It might meet the minimums in the DCP, but who would actually want to live in that sort of development? No one. Fortunately, that development got fixed at the development stage. But unfortunately, also in the inner west, our planners are very keen to stop that sort of abuse of the planning laws, and to make sure that we have livable spaces. And that is the real way that investors can actually get the most bang for their buck, by creating livable spaces that are in high demand, that people actually want to live in, will enjoy living in it, and therefore will not question what they have to pay in order to live in it. And there are plenty of examples of that all over the LGA. And that's what really investors need to do. Put a little bit of effort and thought into their developments and make them spaces that people want to buy, not just chicken coops for, we want free range residents, not chicken coop residents. And that's really what we need developers to think about.
Exactly. And we're reaching our time limit for today. Unfortunately, we'd love to hear more from you. But I think with the federal government budget announcing much more support for young families with children under 5, I suppose the inner west could be a place that people who rent could look to live with. The number of childcare facilities in the area and schools, I believe there's a lot of that going on in your area. And it could be good for investors to buy some properties to rent out to these type of families that are a bit bigger that you mentioned. Would that be correct?
I think that would be a great idea. I raised my children here. I moved 3 days before my son was born to my house in Stanmore, and my children were raised here. At that time, people were horrified. Why would you want to live in the inner city? Now everyone says how lucky you are because of all the facilities. It's a great place for children to live because they can get around easily on the public transport. It's a safe area for them to walk around in. There are plenty of parks for them to play in. So I would love it if more young people came into the area with their children, and that's why I've been particularly emphasising in this interview that we need to consider the needs of families as well. It's a perfect space for young families. There's plenty of support facilities. We have over 100 different childcare facilities. Council, in fact, operates the most number of childcare. We have a number of facilities of different kinds: long day care, after school care and preschool, and all of which is at an excellent level, and we consider that to be an important service to people. So move in and enjoy yourself, and make sure that families can continue to live here, because children make an area vibrant, and also they grow up to be investors, renters, and owners themselves, and they want to stay in the area where they grew up in. Most of them, so especially when it's the coolest area in the whole of Australia to live in.
Spot on. You're obviously very passionate about your position as the member for Stanmore in the Inner West Council region of Sydney, and I thank you so much for your time and the thought you've given our interview today. We've been very lucky to have you on our platform. With that, this is Sage signing off. That was an absolutely fabulous show, and as you know, stay apprised and invest wise with Kalkine.